On the morning of August 16, 1942, in the quiet suburban streets of Daly City, California, residents looked up at the sky and saw an incredible and alarming sight. A massive 150-foot-long United States Navy blimp, its gas bag partially deflated, was drifting silently and aimlessly down towards their homes. It crashed onto a residential street, its immense silver body draping over power lines and the roofs of houses. Emergency crews and military police rushed to the scene, expecting to find the horrifying aftermath of a crash and the bodies of the injured or deceased crewmen. But when they finally managed to get inside the control car, they were met with an even greater and more baffling mystery. The airship was in perfect working order. The engine switches were on, the radio was functional, and the crew's parachutes were still neatly stowed in their places. But the two-man crew had vanished into thin air. This is the incredible true story of the L-8 airship, the ghost blimp, and the enduring 80-year-old mystery of what happened to its crew. But before we start our story, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and hit that notifications bell so you won't miss any of our new incredible stories. To understand why a massive Navy blimp was patrolling the skies over California, we must first travel back to the dark and fearful months that followed the attack on Pearl Harbor. In early 1942, the American West Coast was gripped by a palpable fear of invasion. The Japanese Empire was a seemingly unstoppable force in the Pacific, and the idea of an attack on the mainland was not a fantasy. It was a very real and present danger. This fear was amplified by a series of real events. In February of 1942, a Japanese submarine surfaced off the coast of Santa Barbara and shelled an oil field in what became known as the bombardment of Elwood. While the damage was minimal, the psychological impact was immense. The enemy was at the gates. This led to the infamous Battle of Los Angeles just a day later, where the city was plunged into a citywide blackout and the sky was lit up by anti-aircraft fire as panicked gunners fired at what they believed were Japanese planes, but which were likely just weather balloons. But the most significant threat was silent and invisible, lurking just beneath the waves. Japanese submarines began to actively patrol the shipping lanes off the coast of California and Oregon, sinking merchant ships and oil tankers. The U.S. Navy, with most of its Pacific fleet destroyed at Pearl Harbor or engaged in combat thousands of miles away, was stretched incredibly thin. They needed a new weapon to patrol their own coastline, a new set of eyes in the sky to hunt for these enemy submarines. The solution was a tried and tested piece of technology from a previous era, the blimp. The U.S. Navy quickly commissioned a massive fleet of L-class blimps. They were slow, but they were the perfect platform for anti-submarine warfare. They could stay airborne for hours, even days at a time, flying low and slow over the ocean, their crews patiently scanning the waves for the dark shadow of a submerged submarine or the telltale periscope that broke the surface. Each blimp was armed with depth charges and a machine gun capable of attacking any enemy sub it found. A vast network of blimp patrol bases was established along the entire West Coast, from San Diego to Washington State. One of the most important of these bases was on Treasure Island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Our story's protagonists were the two-man crew of one of these blimps, Airship L-8. The pilot and commander of the mission was Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody, an experienced naval aviator. His co-pilot was Ensign Charles Adams. On the morning of August 16, 1942, the two men prepared for a routine anti-submarine patrol. They lifted off from their base on Treasure Island and guided their massive silver airship out through the Golden Gate, heading towards the Farallon Islands, a key patrol area. The weather was clear and the mission was completely routine. At 7:42 a.m., Lieutenant Cody radioed in to his base. He reported that he had spotted a large, suspicious oil slick on the surface of the water, a potential sign of a submerged enemy submarine. He informed the base that he was taking the L-8 down to a lower altitude to investigate. That was the last communication ever received from the crew. After that final routine message, the L-8 went silent. At first, no one at the base was overly concerned. Radio silence was not uncommon. But as the hours passed and the blimp failed to make its scheduled check-ins, the concern began to grow. Then, strange reports began to trickle in. Beachgoers and other pilots reported seeing a Navy blimp flying erratically, drifting slowly and aimlessly up the coast. The airship was seen drifting over the Golden Gate Bridge, and then it began to descend over the residential neighborhood of Daly City, a suburb just south of San Francisco. The sight was surreal. The massive 150-foot-long airship drifted silently over the houses. It snagged on a hillside, which tore a larger gash in its gas bag, causing it to descend more rapidly. It finally came to rest, draped over the power lines and rooftops of a residential street, its control car crashing into the pavement below. The quiet suburban morning had just been interrupted by the arrival of a ghost ship from the sky. As the first firefighters and military police arrived at the bizarre crash scene in Daly City, their immediate priority was the safety of the crew. They forced open the jammed door of the control car, expecting to find the two pilots inside, either injured or worse. But when they looked inside, the mystery only deepened. The control car was completely empty. The two-man crew, Lieutenant Cody and Ensign Adams, had vanished. The initial assumption was that they must have bailed out of the airship before it crashed. But a quick and thorough search of the control car revealed a series of baffling and contradictory clues that made absolutely no sense. The interior of the control car, apart from the damage caused by the minor impact, was in perfect working order. The engine switches were still in the on position. Whatever had happened to the two pilots, it was not a planned or orderly evacuation. The only things that were missing were the two men themselves. A massive search and rescue operation was immediately launched by the Navy, one of the largest on the West Coast during the war. Ships and planes scoured the Pacific Ocean for hundreds of square miles, from the Farallon Islands to the coast, searching for any sign of the missing crewmen, a body, a piece of a uniform, any wreckage that might explain their disappearance. They found nothing. It was as if the two men had been plucked from their airship in midair, leaving no trace behind. A formal naval board of inquiry was convened to investigate the incredible incident. They meticulously examined the L-8 airship, which was repaired and found to be in perfect mechanical condition. They interviewed every witness who had seen the ghost blimp on its aimless journey, and they were left with a perfect and impenetrable mystery. For over 80 years, historians and investigators have been haunted by the central question: what happened to the crew of the L-8? Over the decades, several theories have emerged. The most sinister theory, given the wartime context, was that the two men had been captured by the enemy. Could the oil slick they were investigating have been from a Japanese submarine, which then surfaced and somehow captured the two officers from their low-flying airship? While this makes for a dramatic story, investigators have largely dismissed it. There were no credible reports of Japanese submarine activity in that specific area on that day, and the logistics of capturing two men from a moving airship would have been incredibly difficult and risky for a submarine crew. Another theory considered was that of foul play, a murder-suicide scenario where one of the men had killed the other and then jumped from the airship. But this theory was also quickly discounted. Both Lieutenant Cody and Ensign Adams were experienced, dedicated, and psychologically stable officers with no history of conflict between them. Their service records were exemplary. There was absolutely no evidence or motive to suggest such a dark and violent act. This lack of a logical explanation has, of course, opened the door to more outlandish paranormal theories. The story of the ghost blimp has become a classic case in the lore of unexplained phenomena, with some suggesting the two men were victims of some kind of alien abduction or had passed through a strange atmospheric portal. Tragically, both men would have quickly perished in the cold, unforgiving waters of the Pacific. This theory explains why the airship was in perfect condition and why the parachutes and life raft were left behind. It was not a planned abandonment. It was a sudden, tragic, and heroic accident. But even this official theory is not perfect. It leaves behind its own nagging questions. Would an experienced pilot like Lieutenant Cody truly abandon his post and his multi-million-dollar military airship without first sending a radio distress call? It was a profound mystery. The official search was eventually called off, and a year later, both Lieutenant Ernest Cody and Ensign Charles Adams were officially declared dead, their bodies never to be recovered. The airship they had been flying, the L-8, was repaired and returned to service, going on to have a long and distinguished career, eventually being nicknamed the Goodyear Ghost. But its story will forever be haunted by the silent, unanswered question of its first and most mysterious flight.